They watched me drown and clapped while I sank, and now I can hear every single thought they never said out loud. I used to think betrayal sounded like a slammed door, or maybe the crack of a breaking heart. But no, betrayal is quieter. It's applause. It's the cheer of people you trusted while they push you under, smiling for the cameras. When I went under that night, the world thought it was an accident. Maybe it was. Maybe I wanted to see how silence felt. I remember the cold, the water pressing against my chest, the last sound I heard being their voices, Lena's sob, Darren's curse, Casey's whisper. I thought I'd die with their names in my lungs. But death wasn't the end. It was a filter. It stripped the noise away. When I opened my eyes again, I could hear them, not their voices, but their thoughts. The guilt, the lies, the fear that my name might rise again like a ghost from that lake. They thought they buried me in silence. But silence taught me to listen. And now, I'm listening to every secret they tried to hide beneath the surface. Before the silence, there was music. That's how I remember it, vibrations in cheap speakers, laughter that lasted longer than sleep, and a dream that felt too big for the tiny basement we called our studio. The air was always thick with coffee and dust from the old sound panels I swore I'd fix one day. I never did. My name's Elias Vane. Back then, it actually meant something. I was 28, a producer trying to build an empire out of borrowed instruments and unpaid hours. It wasn't much, but it was ours. There were 4 of us, me, Lena, Darren, and Casey. Lena was the voice. I mean that literally, she had one of those voices that could make a crowd hold its breath. I used to joke that when she sang, even God paused to listen. She'd roll her eyes at that, but I saw how she secretly loved it. We met at a dive bar gig, she was performing, I was running sound. She forgot her second verse halfway through, froze mid-song, and I started playing a harmony from the booth to help her find her pitch again. Afterward, she found me in the alley behind the bar, handed me a beer, and said, "You play like you're trying to save someone." I told her maybe I was. Darren came later, the kind of friend you don't remember meeting because he's just, always been there. He handled the business side, or what we like to call, the adult stuff. He had this easy charisma, a voice that could sell thunder to the sky. He kept me grounded, made sure the rent was paid, even when it meant cutting deals that scared me. But I trusted him. I trusted all of them. And then there was Casey. Sweet, obsessive Casey. She started as a fan, one of the first people to show up at every gig. After a while, she became part of the team, handling emails, merch, and whatever else we couldn't afford to hire someone for. I used to catch her staring at us when we rehearsed, like she was watching a miracle unfold. "You guys are going to change everything," she'd say, and for a while, I believed her. We didn't have money, not really. We lived off instant noodles and late-night optimism. We'd stay up until sunrise, layering vocals and arguing about snare tones. There were fights, sure, but the kind that ended in laughter and half-burned takeout. Lena would lie on the studio floor, eyes closed, humming melodies that came from nowhere. Darren would be on his laptop crunching numbers, muttering about market strategies. Casey would bring us snacks and record behind-the-scenes clips for our tiny YouTube channel. I'd sit at the console, surrounded by the people I thought would never leave me. One night, I remember leaning back in my chair, watching them through the haze of cheap neon lights. "We'll rise together, right?" I said. Lena looked up, half asleep but smiling. "Always." The word echoed like a promise. I didn't know then how fragile promises were, how they can sound like forever and still end in silence. We got our first real break 6 months later. A small record label in LA offered us a development deal. Nothing glamorous, but it was enough to make us feel seen. I remember the 4 of us driving down the coast, blasting our demo tracks, the car windows open wide enough to let the future in. Darren kept saying, "This is it, Eli. This is where the story starts." But stories don't start there. They end there. They just don't know it yet. The label wanted a music video for our debut single. We couldn't afford a real production team, so we did it ourselves at a nearby lake, a hauntingly still place, glass-smooth water surrounded by fog and trees. Lena wore this white dress that looked almost spectral in the early morning light. The idea was simple: she'd stand at the shoreline, singing about being reborn, while I waded into the water behind her, symbolizing loss. Irony has a sense of humor, doesn't it? The lake was colder than I expected. I remember the shock of it biting my skin, the pull beneath my knees. I went too far out trying to get the perfect shot. My foot slipped on a rock, and suddenly the camera was tilting, the world folding in on itself. Water filled my ears, my mouth, my nose. For a second, it felt like peace. Like quiet finally had a sound. Then hands grabbed me, Lena's voice screaming my name. She dragged me up, coughing and gasping, eyes wide in terror. Darren was shouting something about the camera gear. Casey was crying, shaking uncontrollably. I laughed through the coughing fit, waving them off. Guess the shot's too real, huh? Lena slapped my arm, furious. That wasn't funny, Eli. But later that night, she fell asleep in my arms, and I thought the whole thing would make a great story to tell one day, how the artist almost drowned for his art. I didn't realize it was foreshadowing. Looking back, everything had cracks even then. I just didn't see them. I didn't want to. Lena's smile had started to fade when she thought I wasn't looking. Darren was taking more calls outside. Casey had a notebook full of things she never let me read. But I brushed it all off. I told myself every dream comes with stress, every friendship with friction. That's what makes it real. If I'd listened harder, maybe I would have heard the truth beneath their words. But I wasn't listening. Not yet. Back then, all I could hear was the music, our music. And it was still beautiful. It started small. Betrayal never arrives with thunder. It seeps in, soft as static. You only hear it once it's already filled the room. After the lake shoot, things got busier. The record deal started to take shape, our schedules stacked with rehearsals, meetings, photo shoots, things we dreamed of. But dreams don't tell you how to handle success when it starts changing the people you love. Lena was the first to drift. It wasn't sudden, just subtle. She'd linger on her phone more. Lock the screen when I walk in. At night, when we'd usually share headphones and talk through lyrics, she'd say she was tired and turn away. I remember one evening vividly. We were editing vocals in the studio, she'd nailed this haunting harmony, and I wanted to celebrate. I turned to her, smiling. Hey, that was perfect. That's you, Lena, pure emotion. She smiled, but her eyes were somewhere else. Yeah, maybe. Darren said we should double it to make it sound fuller. Darren? I frowned. Since when does he comment on mixing? She shrugged. He's just helping. I brushed it off, thinking I was overreacting. But it was the first note in a melody that would soon turn dissonant. Darren started acting differently too. He was always confident, but lately, there was a sharpness behind it. Decisions were made without me, venue choices, brand deals, even song placements. I'd find out through forwarded emails or, worse, through Lena. When I confronted him, he played it off. Eli, man, you gotta trust me, he'd say, clapping my shoulder with that easy grin. You're the talent. Let me handle the noise. You focus on the art. But the art was my control. Without it, what was I? I noticed how he'd talk to Lena when he thought I wasn't listening, whispering quick, private words between meetings. Their laughter felt coded, like I wasn't meant to understand the joke anymore. And then there was Casey. She still worshipped me, still called me genius and maestro, but she began to know things she shouldn't. One day she brought up an argument I'd had with Lena the night before. How did you know about that? I asked. Oh, I just guessed, she said too quickly, eyes darting away. Little guesses. Convenient timing. Someone was feeding someone information, and I couldn't tell who. The tension bled into the music. Recording sessions turned into silent wars. I'd suggest changes, and Lena would respond with clipped tones. You always think you're right, she said once, slamming her lyric notebook shut. It's not about being right, I said quietly. It's about what sounds true. Maybe your truth isn't everyone's truth anymore, she snapped back. That one stung. She didn't apologize afterward. None of them did. Then the email leaked. I woke up one morning to hundreds of notifications, texts, missed calls, online mentions. My name was everywhere, but not in celebration. Someone had sent private recordings of our early sessions to a blogger, unpolished tracks, rough takes, half-written lyrics. Along with them came emails, fake, I thought at first, showing me belittling Lena, stealing credits, manipulating fans for money. It was a smear campaign. And it worked. Hashtags exploded overnight, hashtag cancel Elias Vane. Hashtag justice for Lena. Every word twisted, every mistake magnified. I called Darren immediately. What the hell is this? I demanded. Calm down, Eli, he said. His voice was steady, too steady. We're looking into it. We? Who's we? The label. PR's already working on a statement. What statement? He hesitated, just a fraction. One that distances us from the allegations. I froze. Distances us? Look, man, it's just temporary. Optics, you know how it is. No, Darren, I said slowly, feeling my pulse crawl up my throat. I don't. You're supposed to have my back. Elias, this isn't personal. But that's the thing, it was. Everything was personal. Every note, every lyric, every late night we'd spent believing in each other. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I went to Lena next. I needed her to tell me it was all nonsense, that she knew me better than that. She was sitting on the edge of our bed, scrolling through her phone. I could see the headlines reflected in her eyes. Tell me you don't believe this, I said. My voice cracked, a raw tremor I couldn't hide. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Elias, it's a lot. People are saying things. I didn't do any of that. You know me. She sighed, setting her phone down. I know you're under a lot of pressure. Maybe this is just. Just what? I snapped. Me losing my mind? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She stood, walked past me. You're just tired, Eli. Take a break. That phrase, take a break, burned into me. It sounded like care, but it felt like dismissal. Like she was already halfway out the door. The days blurred after that. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My hands shook when I tried to play the guitar. The noise online got louder, uglier. Old friends stopped answering calls. Venues canceled gigs. I turned to whiskey and pills to slow my thoughts, but they only made the silence heavier. Darren avoided me, saying he was handling things. Casey sent sympathetic messages but avoided meeting face to face. Lena moved out for space. Space. Another word for distance. Another word for gone. Then came the statement. It was everywhere by morning, press release, video interviews, headlines. Lena and Darren speak out about their difficult experience with Elias Vane. They didn't use words like abuse. They didn't have to. Their faces said everything. Darren spoke first, his tone somber but professional. We care deeply for Elias, but we've witnessed erratic behavior that made collaboration impossible. Lena followed, voice trembling just enough to sound real. He's not the same person he was when we started. I wish him healing. Healing. That was their final lyric for me. 2 sentences, and my name was poison. I remember throwing a glass at the wall that night. Watching it shatter, I thought, so this is how they see me, something broken, disposable. I scrolled through the comments online, desperate for someone to defend me. Most didn't. Some called me a narcissist. A few said I deserved worse. But one message stood out. It was from an anonymous account, time-stamped only an hour after the press dropped. She said you were replaceable. Guess she found your replacement already. The words hit harder than any headline. I stared at them for minutes, then hours, until my screen dimmed. Days turned into weeks. I stopped answering calls. Stopped leaving the house. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, smiling for the cameras, pretending sadness while cashing sympathy checks. And in that isolation, my mind began to split between reality and paranoia. I'd hear the creak of the floorboards and imagine Darren's shoes. The hum of the fridge became Lena's humming voice, soft and distant. Sometimes, I thought I heard whispers behind the walls, Casey's voice repeating my own lyrics like a curse. I told myself it was the exhaustion. The pills. The noise. But another part of me, the part that still clung to reason, knew I needed answers. So I confronted them. All of them. It was at the studio, the one we built together. I remember standing in the doorway, every breath shaking. They were there, Lena, Darren, Casey, talking quietly, their laughter evaporating the moment they saw me. Elias the ghost. Elias the scandal. Elias the unstable. We need to talk, I said. My voice was steady, but inside I was unraveling. Darren stood up, hands raised in mock calm. Eli, now's not a good. Don't, I interrupted. Don't do that. The PR tone. I know what you did. He exchanged a look with Lena. Elias, you're imagining things. You've been under. I saw the messages. I yelled. The emails, the statements, the way you all. My throat locked. Words choked on betrayal. Lena stood, tears in her eyes, or maybe they were rehearsed. We didn't leak anything. You're not well. I laughed, bitter and hollow. That's the story now, isn't it? The unwell artist. Casey stepped closer, trembling. Elias, please, you're scaring me. Scaring you? I whispered. You all ruined me. Darren crossed his arms. You're paranoid, man. You need help. That word again. Help. Another soft dagger dressed as concern. And in that moment, I realized, they'd already rewritten me. To the world, I wasn't betrayed. I was the unstable genius who finally cracked. I left without another word. The cold air outside hit me like a slap. As I walked away from that studio, everything I'd built, everything I'd loved, collapsed behind me, soundlessly. But even as the darkness closed in, one thought clung to me, whispering through the noise. If I can't trust what they say, maybe I'll learn to hear what they don't. The silence after the confrontation was worse than the shouting. Days blurred. My phone stopped lighting up, no calls, no messages, just the faint glow of notifications from strangers dissecting my life. I didn't know where to put all that emptiness, so I buried it under work. But even the music betrayed me. Then, one night, I found the proof. I was cleaning the old hard drive, what was left of the sessions we'd built together, when I opened a folder labeled backup_D. I didn't remember creating it. Inside were screenshots, emails, signed contracts, a series of message threads. Darren's name. Lena's signature. And right there, in pixel clarity, was the transfer of my song rights, every track we'd written together, moved under Darren's company name. My name is erased in black ink. At first, I couldn't breathe. Then I clicked deeper. Messages between Lena and Darren, time-stamped months before the breakup. Half flirty, half strategic. He's losing it. We just have to hold it until the label finalizes the paperwork. I'll handle him. He trusts me. There it was, the affair, the manipulation, the plan. Every moment I doubted my own sanity now had a paper trail. And then, buried among the messages, one more name appeared. Casey. Her chat thread with Lena made my stomach twist. I leaked the demos anonymously. It'll make him look controlling. People will side with you. Good girl. This ends soon. Casey's words were frantic, almost apologetic. She thought she was saving someone from a villain that didn't exist. They'd all played their parts perfectly. And I'd been the fool who wrote the soundtrack. The next morning, it was everywhere. The betrayal wasn't a secret anymore, the whole industry was chewing on it. But not in my favor. Screenshots without context, doctored images, half-truths spun into headlines. Vane's meltdown caught on camera. Behind the genius, manipulation or madness. My sponsors dropped me within hours. Tour dates evaporated. The label froze my accounts. My name became a punchline, my voice a liability. I tried to fight back. I called journalists, lawyers, anyone who'd once called me friend. But no one wanted a story without a villain, and I was perfect for the role. Charismatic, unstable, misunderstood. The audience always loves that archetype. Fans I'd written songs for turned on me. One even messaged, "You inspired me once. Now I see who you really are." That one hurt more than the rest. Sleep became impossible. When I closed my eyes, I'd hear their voices, not memories, but echoes, replaying their laughter in loops. The lake video still lived on my hard drive. I watched it at 3 a.m., frame by frame. The part where Lena's reflection blurred in the water always caught me. It looked like she was vanishing before my eyes. Some nights, I drive without destination, past the old venues, the coffee shop where we used to plan, the billboard that once had our faces on it, now replaced with a new act Darren managed. I remember parking by the lake one evening, engine off, moonlight cutting through fog. The air smelled like rain and endings. I walked down to the edge, shoes sinking into wet sand. The water was still, glassy, waiting. And for a long time, I just stood there. Listening. Thinking of how quiet everything had become. How silence might be the only honest thing left. That's all I'll say about that night. The next part, other people told me. They said a fisherman found me at dawn. Said I wasn't breathing. Said the paramedics worked for 6 minutes before my heart remembered its rhythm. Clinically dead. Medically alive. Spiritually, something in between. When I woke, the world felt wrong. The air hummed, faint and electric. Every sound carried a shadow of another sound behind it, like hearing the echo of a whisper before the whisper itself. Doctors called it trauma. Shock. Auditory hallucinations. I didn't argue. I nodded, took the pills, and waited for release. But deep down, I knew something had changed. It started small. A nurse was adjusting my smiling kindly. Her lips didn't move, but I heard her think, poor boy. So young to throw it all away. I blinked, sure I imagined it. Then she said aloud, "You're lucky to be alive." The same voice, but now spoken. My chest went cold. Later, when a doctor told me I was progressing well, I heard, "Don't relapse here, it'll ruin our report," float right behind his words. It wasn't imagination. It was inside, like my mind had opened a door and forgotten how to close it. I learned quickly that it wasn't constant. Only when emotions ran high, guilt, fear, hate, love. That's when the whispers came, raw and unfiltered. They discharged me quietly, no media, no family. I had none left. I signed the papers, walked out with nothing but the hospital bracelet still clinging to my wrist. The world felt louder than ever. Every person I passed seemed wrapped in noise, hidden thoughts flickering like static. It was overwhelming at first, a storm of half-sentences, late for work. I need coffee, don't look at him, that's the one from the news. I wore a hood to disappear, but whispers don't care about fabric. When I finally gathered courage to check their social media, the whispers sharpened. Lena. Darren. Casey. I pulled up a video of Lena performing live, her first solo showcase. She looked radiant, confident, untouched by guilt. But as she sang, the static in my head grew louder until I caught one clear thread, smooth and trembling. He's gone. He has to be gone. He can't come back. Darren appeared in the same clip, clapping beside the stage. His thought bled through right after hers, keep smiling. Keep the brand clean. Casey's photo popped up next in a fan story, her eyes red, smile forced. And her thought, whispered through the noise, made my pulse stop. I didn't mean to hurt him. God, please don't let him hate me. That's when I understood, their guilt wasn't silence. It was alive. And I could hear it. I tested it, pushing the limits. Crowds made it too loud, so I practiced in quiet places, cafes, sidewalks, bus stations. Every time someone looked at me with recognition, the static sharpened into words, fear, disgust, pity. Some thoughts sliced, others soothed. But the pattern was clear. Emotion connected us. And guilt screamed the loudest. So I followed it. Followed that invisible thread of guilt like sonar until it pointed back to them, the trio who'd buried me. I started to map their emotions, almost like hearing chords in a song. Lena's guilt was high-pitched, sharp, layered with denial. Darren's was low, a mechanical hum, he regretted nothing except the fear of exposure. Casey's trembled, uneven, sincere. Their voices lived inside me now. It hit me one evening as I sat by my old studio building, watching the lights flicker through the windows where they now worked. I could hear them inside, faint but distinct. Lena's voice, he wouldn't come back. He's too weak for that. Darren's, if he ever shows up, we bury him again. No loose ends. Casey's, barely audible, he deserved better than us. That was the moment everything aligned. They thought they'd silenced me. But silence had taught me how to listen. The water hadn't killed me. It had tuned me. I didn't just survive that night, I'd been remade in it. Now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel the lake around me, cold, endless, patient. The same place they left me to fade has become my anchor. They live their lives thinking the ghost of Elias Vane sank beneath that water forever. But I walk among them, invisible, listening. Their guilt hums like a song only I can hear. And every beat draws me closer. They thought I was gone. But I can hear their fear whispering my name. I moved like a rumor, slow, deliberate, impossible to pin down. When you've been erased, the easiest thing is to become someone else. Not in a flashy way. Not with fake passports or movie set theatrics. You start by stealing moments, small ones, until no one remembers the face that once filled them. I changed my name on the mailing lists. I booked an email with an alias, M. Halloway, and a burner phone that I never used for 2 consecutive calls. I rented a room above a laundromat under a false ID. It smelled of soap and the fatigue of other people's lives. I liked that. I liked being anonymous enough that thoughts slipped out like loose coins and no one noticed their loss. At first, I listened. Not just to the world, but to how the world sounded without me in it. Crowds buzzed in a way I'd never heard before, layers of private sound riding on top of public noise. In a subway car, a businessman thought of his mortgage. A teenager thought of the text she didn't want to send. A woman 2 seats down thought, that's him, wasn't he the one from the scandal? As if naming me aloud might conjure me back into being. The ability wasn't constant. It came in flares. The closer someone's emotion to me, the hotter their guilt or fear or obsession, the clearer their private voice becomes. Pride and boredom were muffled like cotton. Fear was needle-sharp. Regret was a taste at the back of my tongue, bitter, metallic, like pennies in the mouth of a thief. Control was a muscle. At first, it felt like hearing a foreign language in a crowded market. I couldn't pick out a single sentence. I'd leave a coffee shop dizzy, my heart racing with other people's secrets. So I trained. I went to places where emotion piled up, funerals, city council meetings, late-night diners. I sat and focused on one person. I learned to draw the thought closer, like tuning a radio. Breathe in. Narrow the field of attention. Let the noise thin. Exhale the rest. If I calmed my own heart, other voices lined up like obedient birds. It was a cruel skill. It taught me 2 things fast: everyone has skeletons, and emotion is the map to their weakness. Once I had a measure of control, I set the rules. No reckless usage. No petty cruelty. I would not become a parlor trick, flicking people's private moments out like stage confetti. My revenge would be surgical. It would be designed to break structures, not bodies, though sometimes the lines blurred. Lena and Darren were a predictable duet. After the scandal, they leaned into the role the world had given them, sorrowful survivors who'd been wronged by an unstable artist. They released a memorial album that people bought like absolution. Sales skyrocketed. The cover photo of Lena, bathed in soft light, became the new face of redemption. Darren took interviews where he spoke about leadership and protecting art from toxicity. They profited in the most obscene way possible, from a narrative they'd manufactured. Casey, on the other hand, worked PR. She arranged apologies, curated hashtags, and answered fan mail with trembling hands. Her guilt made her words moist and shaky. I could hear her thinking in public, I didn't mean, how did it all go so wrong? That rawness made her the perfect instrument. She wanted forgiveness. She wanted to be forgiven. Those are 2 very different things. I started small. Tiny nudges. A misdelivered message here, a botched file upload there. The kind of sabotage that looked like incompetence. I learned how to manipulate social media without leaving fingerprints, a ghost in a machine. Anonymous accounts, throwaway emails, the old arts of online misdirection. I sent Lena a link to an interview she thought Darren had scheduled. It opened to a spam page and caused a minor PR delay. I didn't need the world to see every move. I needed their lives to wobble, to make them look over their shoulders. I sent Casey a DM from a fake blogger account praising her loyalty and asking for inside scoops. She bit, she always had. She messaged back, slipping herself into further webs. I let her. She wanted atonement and would trade secrecy for kindness. But that wasn't enough. Mere hiccups were amusement more than punishment. I wanted them to feel as hollow as I had felt the day the world turned its face from me. So I escalated. I learned Darren's rhythms, the way he scheduled calls, the names he used for accounts, the charities he pretended to support. I bought domain names that sounded like legitimate outlets he might use. I seeded fake leaks, just enough to reignite old doubts. Fans began to whisper again, and this time the murmurs carried a question: did they lie? Lena started to look over her shoulder during shows. The smile still reached her mouth, but not her eyes. When I watched her videos, I could feel the thought behind her applause: keep going. Don't give them anything to tear apart. Every time she performed, a thread in my mind tugged. Old love is a strange weather system. It blew in gusts, memories of late-night edits, of her hand on my shoulder after a bad take. I wanted to believe, stupidly, that she'd loved me. The voices didn't let me be kind. Her thought was clinical when she wasn't performing, he was good for me, for a time. He reflected on me. I needed that reflection to see myself. There it was. She hadn't loved me. She'd loved what holding me made her look like on stage, a savior, a martyr, a romantic wreck. The image mattered more than the person. My chest went cold. The hurt wasn't the kind of pain that makes noise. It was a clean, surgical ache. I catalogued their guilt. I learned their timing. I learned that guilt frays under pressure and that pride tightens like a noose. And I learned to be patient. The first real misstep came 3 months in. I was sloppy. Overconfident. Pride is punished, I tell you that now. I'd slipped into a cafe wearing a jacket that was almost my shade, an old hoodie someone would have recognized. Casey sat inside, across from a PR agent. I'd thought I could pass by unnoticed, but she looked up. For a second, her eyes widened. My heart lurched. I heard her thought, Eli, and then she spoke aloud, voice small. Do you need something? She didn't run. She reached for her phone, fingers fumbling. I turned and left before she could text anyone. But the crack had formed. The agent at her table squinted in my direction. A pair of heads turned. My chest felt like someone had taken a fistful of cold. Exposure wasn't a single moment, it was an accumulation of nearly seen things. That night, a message appeared on my burner phone. No number, just text. We saw you. Stop. 3 words. 2 threats wrapped in civility. The logic in my head suggested retreat. The childish part of me, hungry for payback, shouted louder. I stepped back. I adopted new rules after that. Honesty among plans. Meticulous spacing between actions. No meeting in a space where they might spot me. I became a shadow again, more careful. The thrill of almost being seen had to be balanced with the calculus of consequence. I also learned that public exposure alone would only fracture them in ways the world would enjoy. If I wanted real undoing, it had to be internal. Let them keep their audiences. Let them keep the money. Take away what made them sleep at night, certainty. So I changed tactics. Instead of yelling their sins into the open, I whispered to the people closest to them. A carefully worded anonymous letter to a manager's inbox here, an edited voicemail there, played back just loud enough to sow suspicion. I made Casey find a text she'd written but then assumed Darren had sent, an implication, not an accusation. I placed a doctored invoice in Lena's studio to make it look like Darren was siphoning money into a shell company. I didn't blackmail. I suggested. I insinuated. I watched them turn on one another like animals at the scent of blood. Distrust crept between them, slow as rot. They began to second-guess. Lena stopped leaving her phone unattended. Darren started taking meetings in hotel lobbies. Casey's hands trembled so much she typed with 2 fingers. The fractures showed as small, mundane betrayals. Lena canceled a session because she forgot to charge her mic. Darren changed the locks on the studio office. They parsed each other's words for subtext. That was my favorite part, when words meant 2 things at once and every double meaning became a blade. And all the while, I listened. I listened to how guilt sounded when they thought no one could hear it. I learned that their fear of being exposed was deeper than their fear of consequences. Reputation, after all, feeds on the future. Take that away and you leave them to live inside their own small rooms. There was one night, months into my slow orchestration, when Casey sent me a message, one I'd planted through an anonymous account posing as a compassionate former fan. She replied in a flurry of paragraphs, asking if there could be forgiveness, if redemption existed. I could have answered. I could have told her to publicly confess, to tear down the construct she had helped build for them. But I held back. Instead, I sent a voice note, a single line from a song Lena used to hum in the studio, stripped of melody. It was the sound of memory. It landed like a breadcrumb, and I watched Casey follow it deeper into her own conscience. She started to crack first. She reached out to me one time, in the cold. She wanted someone who could understand both guilt and forgiveness. But I was not her shepherd. I was the mirror she feared to look into. When she realized what I was doing, she begged. Not for mercy. For me to stop. Eli, please, she wrote. I can't sleep. They'll kill me with their eyes. I read it and felt something loosening inside me. Remorse, maybe. A shade of my old self. For a night, I considered ending it there, letting them flounder, but not finishing them. Then I heard Lena's thought, clear as a bell, keep going. Keep the brand clean. And Darren's, we survive. That's all that matters. They hadn't felt any shame. They'd priced their guilt into a ledger and counted profit. So the cold returned. Revenge was necessary, not for entertainment but for correction. If they'd been willing to make me disappear for gain, then I would make sure nothing that remained of them, no version, no image, no quiet comfort, would exist without discomfort. I tightened my plans. No theatrical reveals. No dramatic confrontations that would let them play victims on camera. This had to be internal, surgical. I would not expose, I would unravel. I would show them their reflections until the mirrors broke. That was the realization that guided me forward. It wasn't enough to be believed. I had to make them feel the truth in a way that their public image couldn't soothe away. They thought they had buried me. I planned to excavate them from the inside out. They taught me patience like an instrument, tune it, oil it, then wait for the right moment to strike a chord. When I finally moved, it wasn't with the heat of anger. It was with the cool precision of someone who has learned to listen to every note of a song before playing the last one. I started with Casey because she was the closest thing they had left that still breathed apology. She had wanted to be forgiven, she wanted absolution like an addict wants another hit. That weakness was everything. I didn't invent the story that put Casey on the knife, I rearranged the pieces until the truth bent into something the world would accept. I planted digital breadcrumbs, small, believable, deniable. I created narratives that fit the angles people already saw, a devoted fan who'd loved too hard and tried to save her idol by leaking demos, a confused young woman who thought she was protecting Lena. The world was already primed to believe any neat villain. I gave it to him. I will not list how I did it. This is not a manual. What I will say is this, I fed information to accounts that could not be traced back to me in obvious ways. I blurred lines, forged slight inconsistencies, and waited as other people, reporters, gossip columns, the worst fans, filled in the blanks with imagination. People love narratives that end in justice. When the first hit piece surfaced, it was polite and clinical. Insider sources claim a fan leaked demos in hopes of protecting the band from toxic dynamics. Then the tumble began. Screenshots, doctored threads, supposedly from Casey's old email. Photos taken out of context. A voicemail that sounded like an admission. Casey fell apart in public. She had a voice then, a small, trembling thing she used in interviews, begging forgiveness. But the internet does not forgive, it eats and moves on. Her face, once sweet in fan videos, became the face of betrayal. DMs filled with hate. Old friends unfollowed. Brands she tried to get internships with closed their doors. Her school expelled her from an internship program. The PR machine, our old world now turned on her, lambasted her naively. I watched from outside her collapse. I watched through feeds and rented rooms. I listened to the private noise she produced in the privacy of panic. I didn't mean to, please, I just thought I was helping. It came thinner, torn at the edges, the way a voice sounds when it's been scrubbed raw. One night I sent her an anonymous message. Not a threat. Not a taunt. A voice only, you can be forgiven. You can step out of the shadow and ask for it. She replied, fingers trembling, how? How do I live with it? I answered in a way that let her imagine mercy. I told her to leave, to change her name, to run. I told her to take whatever peace she could get and to never come back. She did leave. She boarded an overnight bus to nowhere and deleted her accounts. People called it a breakdown. People whispered that she'd been ruined. No one saw the way she looked back at the city from the bus window and the numb hollow she wore like a coat. Weeks later, there was nothing left of Casey online but an empty profile and a few angry messages on forums. She had vanished from the map I'd given her. I don't know if she died, or if she found the small life I offered and stitched it back together in secret. I only know how she smelled that last time I listened to a thought of hers, like rain on dust, like regret trying to wash itself clean. And when she left, a particular sound stopped bleeding into my days, the tremor of her guilt. That silence was reward and curse in equal measure. Darren was a machine that ran on flattery and fear. He had built his empire on charm and 1,000 small deceptions. Expose his ledger and the machine would rattle. But ledgers do not like being exposed easily, they hide in legality and plausible deniability. I could have hired a lawyer, leaked bylines, or arranged for a dramatic reveal. I chose something that fit his arrogance, make the world see that the man who sold trust was a thief of it. I did not hack as movies show. I exploited human cracks, people who owed Darren favors, accountants who had been paid with favors, a sloppy assistant who forwarded a file to the wrong address. I coaxed financial records into the daylight without teaching anyone how to do it. Names of shell companies, invoices funneled into personal accounts, patterns that, once visible, meant there was no neat PR spin left. When the first report went live, it was surgical. Reputable outlets, ones Darren had once courted, posted redacted documents showing transactions that made no sense for a musician's manager, payments to companies registered in offshore accounts, checks written to unlisted consultants, invoices for creative consulting that went into properties in his name. The narrative wrote itself: misappropriation, fraud, a betrayal of the very artists he claimed to protect. Darren held his public face well for a while. He laughed on camera, told jokes, and called the allegations unfounded. But the cracks spread. Sponsors dropped contracts. The label that had once praised his savvy released a statement distancing themselves. The board convened. Lawsuits were filed. Darren's calls to me, soft, pleading, mortal, went to voicemail. He had to survive. I gave him an uglier fate. The night he finally snapped, it was in front of cameras that used to film him giving pep talks. He was meeting reporters after a routine hearing, when someone lobbed a question like a grenade: is Elias Vane alive? Something in him broke. He muttered, audible, a broken thing, he's still alive. He's never gone. Then he laughed, a wild edge cutting across his face. A car pulled up later, people said it swerved. There were highway reports, whispers of rain and a guardrail. The news cycle spun, unconfirmed reports said it was an accident. I didn't cause the car. I never put a hand on the wheel. But the timing looked generous. Darren's death, if it was death, became another messy, unanswerable footnote in a saga none of them wanted to own. Some said he'd driven too fast. Others implied he'd chosen to not look back. In the end, people prefer neat narratives, a man undone by his own lies. What I knew for a fact was this: the man who had smiled through my downfall was gone. The empire he'd curated unraveled overnight. His friends said he'd been haunted, his enemies said he'd been punished. I heard the last, private thought beaten from his memory: I should have buried him better. And felt it like a stone falling into a lake. The ripple reached Lena later, and she tightened. Lena was last, because she was the one who had most enjoyed the performance. Lena had become the face of martyrdom and triumph, and that image was a fortress. To breach it, I needed more than paper scandals. I needed an echo, a mirror she couldn't walk away from. She was living in a house that smelled faintly of lemon and fear, a mansion with sunlight that polished over the cracks. Her life was tidy. Her schedule was curated. Her PR team arranged quiet charity work and Sunday morning segments. But inside, she was brittle. The audience's adoration didn't heal the private threads that kept fraying. I knew I had to make those threads vibrate until they unraveled. I started with small things. A letter left at her gate that looked like a friendly invitation to an industry brunch, a voicemail with a voice like a stranger, a package containing a demo CD with a note, "Remember when?" Little ghosts whispered in her ear that the past wasn't gone. Then I upped the stakes. I wanted the simplest, purest remorse she hid from, the one she never let herself feel aloud. She confessed to no one. But in the late nights, when the house was empty and she thought no one could hear, her mind betrayed her. I'd learned how to bring those private sounds into the room. I don't claim to be a saint. I let her hear herself. I created recordings, not of secret meetings or phone calls stolen by tricks you'd see in films, but I created moments that mirrored the architecture of her own thoughts. I arranged for the playback of softly edited clips, her voice singing in the studio, a private rehearsal where she muttered lines in the dark, a recording of her rehearsed apology spoken with the cadence she used when no one was judging. I played them back to her through channels she trusted, through a link that looked like a private message from a former producer, through a tablet left on the sofa with a playlist named Remember. When she clicked, the first thing she heard was a slow, raw take of a melody we used to write together. Her voice, unguarded. Then, layered beneath it, a whispery collage of thoughts I'd collected, injurious fragments, honest admissions, the careless lines she'd thought only her mind heard. I never invented her words. I simply assembled them, snatches of confession, remorse, self-justification, that her inner voice had once given freely. She heard herself say things she thought she'd never admit. She heard the sentence, almost offhand, "He trusts me. He'll never know." She heard the choked laugh after that line. She heard herself say, "We can't afford him losing it." And in that playback, the public apology she'd given earlier, polished and sorrowful, collided with the rawer truth she now endured live. I watched her stones of composure crack. She called me once, months earlier, when things were still salvageable. "Elias, please," she'd said in a voice I used to know like the shape of my own name. "We can do this without destroying anyone." I had wanted them to forgive me. Now I sat in the front row of her collapse, the conductor of a silent orchestra. When she finally realized the recordings weren't anonymous leaks but a mirror of her thoughts, when the line between private guilt and public confession blurred, her mind began to turn inward, chewing itself. She'd walk through rooms muttering lines that matched the recordings, as if repeating them would absolve her. But spoken aloud, they sounded less like excuses and more like crimes. One night, after a live show where a few critics had sniffed the air for dishonesty and found it, she collapsed into her couch. The mansion around her glowed with candles and the expensive quiet of a life sustained on image. I met her there, unannounced, unrecognized in a coat and a hat, a man with no face to the public now. She saw me and blinked, suspicion and recognition flickering across her face. "Who are you?" she asked, voice small. She sounded like someone in a dream. "You once said I was replaceable," I said. My voice was calm, almost gentle. The lake had taught me how to keep my breath even. "You meant it." She laughed, but it was the broken kind. "Elias, this is a joke. Don't do this. You're not well." I placed a tablet on the coffee table and hit play. Her voice filled the room, but it was different, shorn of concert lights. She heard herself think, and then hear it again. Each admission repeated itself until the truth had no place to hide. For the first time she saw how the world would hear those thoughts if they slipped loose. She watched herself implode with the kind of clarity only a mirror can give. "You said I was replaceable," I repeated, soft as a knife. Elias, please, she whispered, voice shrinking. So I replaced you, I said. With silence. She tried to speak then, to bargain, to plead. Her thoughts were a storm, all at once. I never meant. What have I done, please, how do I survive this? And they collided with the spoken words layered back at her. It was one of the few times the thing I could do felt like justice and not cruelty. Her own inner voice became the jury. After that night, Lena retreated farther into a world of curated appearances and quiet breakdowns. She filled her house with heavy furniture that muffled the sound of her footsteps. She hired a new PR team, one that knew how to dress wounds. But words are not always enough. There are echoes you cannot tidy with a press release. She began to hear the recordings everywhere, the soft hum of a refrigerator, the clink of a glass, the distant echo of a crowd. They were not recordings at all but her own conscience returning like a tide. I watched as the mansion emptied of friends. Patrons no longer dropped by with casseroles during trying times. Donors rescinded invitations. The world that once applauded her now kept its distance, not because they knew the whole truth, but because they smelled rot. She wandered through rooms at night, whispering apologies to furniture as if a sofa could forgive. Once, I heard her mutter on the phone to someone I could not see, I hear him sometimes. Like a voice behind my head. She laughed then, the sound of a woman trying to make herself small. It wasn't theatrical revenge. I didn't break her body. I broke the soft underbelly of what she'd built, certainty. The mansion stayed. The money stayed. But when a person can't trust their own mind, the house is less a refuge than a prison. When the dust settled, if dust ever settles over what I did, there was nothing triumphant in my victory. There was only the small, cold fact that they were no longer the same people who had pushed me under. Casey had vanished into anonymity, if she had chosen to vanish. Darren had been swallowed by a crash that some called an accident, some called a consequence. Lena remained, unmoored and listening to her own thoughts like they were an enemy approaching in the dark. I walked away from each encounter with the same hollow in my chest. Revenge had not turned rust into gold. It had not brought me back the music that we built together. It had not given me back the nights of laughter or the smell of old coffee in our studio. It has only taught me how fragile truth can be, how easily people will swap their conscience for security. People asked later, friends in the vaguest sense, if I felt better. If the voices had stopped. If my life had returned to anything like normal. No. The voices didn't stop. They changed. They were quieter, further away, but always there, a constant current under any room where a betrayer tried to sleep. I could still hear Lena thinking, sometimes, as if the words wore grooves in the air. He replaced me with silence. Then a pause. I deserve this. And then, a long, low humming of regret. When I left Lena's mansion last night, I walked by the lake one more time. The water was still. The moon cut a cold line. I thought of how they'd clapped as I sank. I thought of how applause and indifference had the same shape when you were drowning. I didn't celebrate. I didn't dance on broken foundations. I sat on a bench and let the wind press my coat flat against my ribs. I'd asked the world to listen, and the world had answered. But listening is not a salve. It's a responsibility. I had heard their guilt, their fear, their desperate attempts at self-preservation. I'd made the world feel those things back. In time, whispers began to change. Some people forgave them. Some never did. Scandal moves in cycles. New faces fill the void quickly. The machine rebuilds with newer, slicker parts. That's how it always was. I learned that revenge is not a tidy ledger that balances itself with one final act. It's a long, crooked road that marks you as much as it marks them. I lost pieces of myself on that road, compassion, perhaps, or the naive belief that people could surprise you with goodness. In their place, something else grew, a quiet knowledge, a sense that I could not be as naive again. Lena plays to smaller crowds now. She trembles sometimes on stage and smiles with an effort she used to reserve only for curtain calls. Darren's name shows up in court documents. Casey's disappearance is a cautionary tale in certain online forums, an example of what happens when fandom turns dark. And I walk the city like a man who has learned how to listen to the wrong things and make them speak. I don't tell people how I did it. They don't need to know. Some acts don't ask for applause. The last time I heard Lena's thought, clear as a bell and sharp as frost, she stood at a window, speaking into a recorder for a new interview, and I heard her think, not aloud, but behind her teeth, he's a ghost. He's always watching. Maybe she's right. Maybe I never left the surface at all. Maybe I'm a new kind of creature, part memory, part man, who learned to harvest silence and turn it into a sound the living could not ignore. They thought they had buried me completely. They were wrong. I drowned once. They buried my name. But water remembers every sound. The lake is quiet tonight. Not the stillness of peace, more the kind that listens back. A wind drifts across the surface, lifting small ripples that catch the moonlight and fold again. I sat where the old camera used to stand the day we filmed the video. The tripod marks are long gone, swallowed by moss and time, but I still see them if I close my eyes. The town changed. New houses, new people who don't know the story. They jog past with their headphones on, never noticing the man on the bench who hums to himself. I like that anonymity. It's the only kind of fame that doesn't rot you. The phone in my pocket buzzes now and then with messages from producers who think I could consult anonymously on sound design. I never answer. I have nothing left to teach anyone about sound, except maybe that silence is a song too, if you learn to hear it. I toss a stone into the water. It skips twice, sinks on the third. The ripples widen until the lake looks like it's breathing. For a second I think I can hear their laughter, Lena's bright, Darren's low, Casey's small and nervous, woven into the night air like an old chorus. Then it's gone. The water closes over it as if it never happened. Some nights I wonder whether I ever really came back. I have memories that feel borrowed, voices that arrive before sound reaches my ears. They call my name from places I can't see, radio static, the whir of passing cars, the hush before rain. It could be guilt, it could be imagination. The mind, once cracked, lets in all kinds of echoes. If anyone asked me whether I regret it, I'd tell them regret and revenge share the same root, they both grow in the dark and drink the same water. One poisons you slowly, the other keeps you alive long enough to see what you've become. I think of Lena sometimes, standing under stage lights, singing to faces that only half remember the songs we wrote. Maybe she still hears me. Maybe the whisper in her ear when the crowd goes silent is just her conscience. Or maybe it's me. Maybe we're both caught in the same reverb, doomed to repeat the same lines until the sound fades for good. A heron lands near the shore, tall and motionless. It watches me with that still patience birds have when they mistake you for part of the landscape. I envy it, the purity of just existing without needing to make sense of anything. It doesn't care who drowned here, who lived, who listened. It only knows the next ripple. I stand. The ground is damp and cold through my shoes. My reflection wavers on the surface, half face, half shadow, and I barely recognize it. Maybe I am a ghost, but not the kind that haunts. More like the kind that lingers because it has nowhere else to go. I whisper into the dark, to no one and to everything, you can stop clapping now. The show's over. The lake gives no answer. Only a slow, low hum, a resonance in the air that feels like memory vibrating against the bones of the world. I close my eyes and listen, just as I did the night I almost died. There it is again, faint, uncertain, the sound of voices carried across the water. My name. A pause. Another. Then silence. I smile. Not triumph, not sorrow, just the small acknowledgement that the world still makes a kind of music, even out of ruin. I let the sound fade and opened my eyes to the silver reflection trembling on the lake. They thought I died that night. But I only learned how to listen.